Good morning, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Friday Morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff. Good morning, sir.
Yes, morning, Pete. Morning, Pete.
How's things up in Canada? If you like
Pretty
me,
cool.
no clouds here whatsoever.
Not here either, but it's very cold. I'll probably get out for a jog today. And off camera, we were talking about Voivod. Voivod's been my jogging band lately. They really. I just love everything about that band, like all the lyrics and the concepts and the artwork and everything. They're a good one to keep you moving around the streets. So
They are. I've been listening to Black Sabbath at the gym a lot lately.
Oh yeah,
it's been my go-to band at the gym. I don't know why. Just
yeah.
I must be getting excited for the Technical Ecstasy box that's coming out. I don't know. Although I haven't been listening to that album, but I've been listening to some other stuff. But yeah, it's crisp here too. It's like you can feel fall is coming pretty quick, I think.
Yeah.
Which I'm ready for a little bit of not all this rain and some at least pleasant weather. That's what I'm like looking for. So, but we'll see. So anyway, today, everybody. We've got
I was going to say, like they say about Toronto. I mean, they probably say this about a lot of places, but there's two seasons: construction and winter. And now it feels like winter's coming. So,
I mean, yeah, I can kind of agree. As someone who's lived in New York my whole life, when I was a kid, we had literally 4 seasons that were very distinct, and you had, you had plenty of time with each season to enjoy the fall, the crisp fall air and the foliage, the winter and the snow, the spring, the thaw, and then the plants blooming and the leaves growing, and then the summer. Now it's like we have really long summers. Fall basically doesn't happen, then you're in winter. And then spring, it's like, the snow melts, and then like 2 weeks later, it's 85 degrees. So it's almost like it's like 2 and a couple halves. That's really about it. But anyway, we won't get into the reasons why, because I think we kind of started that with last week and people didn't like that too much. So we won't touch on that whole thing. So anyway, it's all about the music here, right? So today is part 2 of Greatest Album Bombs. So these are albums in rock and roll history that maybe had a lot of hype, didn't do good business, followed a mega album, didn't really do good business. Doesn't necessarily mean that these albums are good, bad, or ugly. And there's going to be instances where we really like some of these releases, but the general public seem to not really care. So these are considered commercial and sometimes artistic failures and flops. We're going to call them bombs, and we've each picked out 5 more. I'll have Martin kick us off with his number 5.
All right. So I'm going to go in chronological order this time. And my first band is Starz. There's the patch, right? I think that came with the debut album. So first they did this, and then they did, where is it here? Then they did this. So this is a situation where it's a bomb because of the hope and the hype that came from the first album and this album. So when you get to this album, there's definitely a lot of hope and hype about this band. They were going to be a massive band. I feel like I've talked about them before, so I'm going to try talk about it in a different way, obviously with the theme of this bomb thing. But yeah, the bomb album is this one. So attention shoppers, this was I remember just the disgust and the shock that happened when I went out and bought this, first seeing that, okay, well, they're not leather and studs anymore. They look kind of happy on the back there, kind of weird. This is sort of neutral. You don't know how bad it's going to be here. But the whole idea here is that there was so much, everybody thought they were going to be the next Kiss. They were going to be bigger than Angel. Why not? All the songs were there. They have the personality, the looks, the great singer in Michael Lee Smith. So played this record, and I believe what happened was I started with what they call that side. It has this side and that side. And I think by error, because I remember this distinctly, playing that side, so second side first, and loving almost my 2 favorite Starz songs of all time in X-Ray Specs and Good Ale We Seek. And then the rest of that side was poppy. And the entire this side was poppy, and we just hated this album so much, and we're just like depressed that this great band had gone this way, and it's not even recorded any good. Like, it's got a really bad recording on it. But And then they followed up with this one and got kind of heavier again, but this doesn't have a great recording either. And it was kind of all over. So in terms of the idea of bombing, this is almost one of the most the earliest examples of a really shocking critical bomb, and just a change in direction, and a bomb for the faithful, and a panic by management and band that what they were doing before wasn't working fast enough. Even though had they stuck around, they probably would have done better, because soon, heavy metal was in vogue again in a couple of years. But the important thing around that time is that there was this reaction against metal. Everybody kind of thought that the hard rock of Aerosmith and Ted and Kiss and all that era was over. We know the story well. Kiss goes mellow, Derringer goes mellow, Montrose goes mellow. Blue Oyster Cult, arguably they say with Mears is a little mellower. I never bought that story. It seems about as mellow as Spectres or Agents anyways. But Ted Nugent has problems. So everybody's kind of figuring that it's kind of like over. And with the baby bands, Moxie does the same thing. Eventually Tease does the same thing. So Starz is almost the most egregious example of that. So this one really, it was such a bomb on the angry young metalhead fan level, of the 150 or 200,000 people who were buying the first two Starz albums. I mean, they probably sold into the six figures, I'd say safely. But yeah, this really ticked everybody off. So there's the first one, a critical bomb off of Hope.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point, how they felt that they weren't kind of growing fast enough. It's like, all right, we've got a little bit of success, but we gotta accelerate this. So instead of putting out a really kick-ass record, they put out what I've always called a goofy hard rock album, because to me that album is a goofy hard rock album. It's just not serious, other than a couple tracks there. It's just forgettable, pedestrian, commercial hard rock, and it's not even memorable, which is the sad thing. Yeah, it's a band that should have been huge, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna switch my gears a little bit. I originally didn't really have these in any such order, but I like Martin's whole chronological thing. This is probably should be the number one on my list, but it's the first because it's the earliest one. Love Beach by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Otherwise known as their, the Bee Gees look in Jamaica, right? Because first of all, one of the worst album covers of all time. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know what the label was thinking. Now, they probably weren't thinking anything, because quite frankly, if you know any of the history behind this album and this time in the history of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, they weren't getting along at all here. So the fact that they got all three of them to kind of stand together in the Bahamas, in Nassau, which is where they recorded this, with smiles on their faces, probably took a lot. Basically, this was the last album that they had on their contract at the time, and they were already frayed at the seams. I mean, this band had obviously been spending a ton of time out on the road for all the years, since 1970. This band basically tour album, almost every single year, little breaks in between at times. But they were at the point where I think they were really sick of each other. And, sales of the last, of course, Brain Salad Surgery was a huge hit for them. Then you had the Works albums, which did well, but not quite to that level. But I think by then these guys were completely sick of each other. And this was their last contractual album. It only went gold. Didn't even crack the top 50. Okay, which just goes to show you how much they've slipped by here. Bad album cover. Basically, Lake and Palmer went into the studio, recorded their parts, got out of Dodge. And they basically left Keith Emerson there to finish up the whole rest of the album, to add his keyboard parts, to work with the production. And for all intents and purposes, the band were just basically done with each other. So they release All I Want Is You as a single. It basically dies. There's no other really memorable tracks on here. You got side one of the LP. You've got a selection of mostly short pop songs. The big ELP bombast, not really here. Canario's okay. The Gambler's decent, but Love Beach is terrible. Taste of My Love, For You, all real sappy pop songs. might have expected something like this off of like a Greg Lake solo album. The one memorable track here is Memoirs of an Officer and a Gentleman, which is the big epic that's on side 2. That's got a lot of elements of what we all came to know and love from the band, but it basically sinks without a trace. Like I said, doesn't even crack the top 50, squeaks out gold. And I think only probably on name alone, probably the people that bought it probably sold it shortly thereafter. And they didn't even tour behind it. Basically the band just basically decided that that's enough, and the contract was over. The album sunk without a trace, breaks up, and we don't see them, the three of them, together for about a little more than a decade afterwards. Of course, we've got the Emerson, Lake and Powell thing that comes out probably about 8-9 years later on, which is the first time we see an Emerson, Lake and something. Of course, Carl Palmer goes to Asia a couple of years later and does big business there. So, but yeah, this is, most people, when you look at the catalog of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, yeah, the last 2 things they did are not very good, In the Hot Seat and the Black Rain. Although Black Rain was kind of a decent return for them. But most people look at this album, if it's not the worst in their catalog, it's probably the second worst. And the sales basically told the story. So there you have it.
It's funny. You look at that cover. It's a little homoerotic, right? You got one guy taking off his shirt a little bit. You got another guy taking off his shirt a little more. Another guy taking off his shirt a little more, and they're on a beach, but not just a beach. It's a love beach.
It's a love beach.
There's 3 guys alone on a love beach. So,
and what's interesting, you bring up a good point. What's interesting is the guy who always took his shirt off in concert on the drums is the only one who kept the shirt on, Carl Palmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, this looks like Yacht Rock Central, Love Beach, called Love Bomb, right? Well, the Tubes have, I think, the hold on that particular title, but it's just, it's just not good. It's not good. Yeah. I still occasionally come up to people who will defend this album, and it's like, yeah, it's got its moments, but man, it's, stack up to the rest of their catalog. This is just pretty putrid in spots. So
right on. A taste of my love indeed. Come taste the band, right? Okay. My next one is actually, I picked this because it is literally the first one that came to mind, although I didn't use it in the other one. But I thought it would be a good choice because it has to get in this list somewhere. So I figured I'd bring it up. Queen Hot Space.
Oh, yeah.
This is definitely one that I think the reason you have to pick this the most is it fits in both departments, critical bomb and commercial bomb, but it is one of the most shocking changes in a band direction I can actually think of, because you look at the entire first side of it, and the whole thing is synthy, funky, minimalist dance club music. Yeah. I literally went through it again and realized, okay, in the second track called Dancer, there's a little bit of a rock chorus to it where there's some Brian May and stuff, but otherwise Brian is essentially MIA. There's absolutely nothing on side 1 that is even close to Another One Bites the Dust, because even Another One Bites the Dust, when you play it against this, is like guitar, bass, and drums, right? And vocals. It's like, okay, we recognize how this music gets made, even though it's a disco song, right? But that is not the case here. You get to side 2, and they changed things up a little bit. I mean, there's a regular hard rock song in Put Out the Fire. Life is Real is a great ballad. Calling All Girls, you're kind of back to the same thing, although it has a weird little 60s rock garage girl, doo-wop vibe to it. Las Palabras de Amor is an awesome, great big Queen ballad. That's fine. Cool Cat is exactly like side 1, and Under Pressure is a cool rock song. It's an amazing song, but it's recorded at a different time. It's got David Bowie on it. It's the only reason this record really sold any copies whatsoever, right? And on the commercial front, News of the World, 4 times platinum, Jazz platinum, The Game 4 times platinum for The Game because of Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and Another One Bites the Dust, Play the Game. Big album, but it's Mac producing, so you're starting to get that Mac slap sound. But the Mac sound absolutely takes over on this one, and you really get the full-on indicative Billy Squier type Mac sound on this. But as as far as you could get. So yeah, that's the incredible thing about this, is just how shocking a change it was. I literally, off the top of my head, it would be a neat exercise to see, whoever else changed direction this radically ever. Some of the punk bands, I suppose, did. They went full on punk to full on pop. That definitely happened. But I can't think of too many, just regular classic rock bands that changed this radically. So this one kind of had to be in here. Nuno, if you go to the Wikipedia, there's a long quote about Nuno saying, "Oh, I really liked it. I loved how they changed, and it was so different. I could still hear the songs in it, but the songs are good and all this." It's like the songs aren't even good. I don't think he's right about that. I think he's just trying to put a silver lining on the record, right? And they never recovered. I mean, they obviously, went back to more conventional stuff for most of the albums that came on, but they lost a lot of things in the process. They just never returned to certain things that Queen used to do. But yeah, so this was the big Freddie really getting into gay club culture and all that, and there started to be a big clash between that contingent of the band and anybody else who wanted to rock anymore. And obviously, Freddie got his way because Brian is gone, essentially. The Brian we love, and the legendary Brian doing really, really cool Brian things, is kind of gone forever. You could just find a few songs later on that you love or whatever, and that are heavy, and you hear but the Brian of the hard rock Brian of those first 25 Queen hard rock classics versus the latter 15 hard rock Queen songs, just night and day. Big difference.
Yeah, it's like they let him come out and play like 1 or 2, maybe 3 songs per album going forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was about it. Yeah, I mean, that album basically killed them here in North America. And you're right, they never recovered here at all. They got a little bit of attention when Innuendo came out, but man, all those albums in between just sank without a trace here. I was horrified when I first heard that album. Completely horrified. I'm like, what is this? I loved Under Pressure. Put Out the Fire is great. Is that the hard rock song on there? Is that Put Out the Fire?
That's the only one. Yes, the first one on side 2. Yeah.
Las Palabras de Amor is pretty good. I honestly don't really care much about the rest of it. Not good at all. Yeah, that's a perfect selection for this format. It totally is. And what did that sell? Did that go gold?
Oh, it went gold. It went, it snuck out gold, essentially. And again, all of that is from Under Pressure.
Yeah. That's the carryover from the game and the hit single. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the neat thing about Under Pressure is, just like Play the Game, like I used to think as a kid for years and years, Play the Game, haha, it's a ballad. But just like that, that or Mustafa or Under Pressure, there's a lot of heavy stuff that they get to later in the song. Like everybody arrives in a lot of these Queen songs, and it really rocks out at some point. Yeah. And you kind of tend to forget that, you think Play the Game, but then there's heavy stuff, right? Even Somebody to Love kind of rocks out eventually.
I agree. I think Under Pressure is absolute genius of a song.
Yeah.
And me personally, never get tired of it. I could listen to it over and over and over again.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So moving up chronologically here, we're going to go to 1991. So this particular album followed basically this band. Every album they had released up until this point was a multi-platinum blockbuster. All right. To different degrees. Some sold a lot more than others, tons of hit singles. I mean, this band's profile here in the States, at least, was huge. They were one of the big bands. And then, as we've seen in the past, they part with their lead singer. They bring in a new guy who nobody knows, and the new album largely gets ignored. I'm talking about Unusual Heat by Foreigner. Followed, all these just mega albums, and Inside Information, which is the album that came before, probably their lowest selling album up to the point, but still that was multi-platinum as well. This didn't even crack the top 100. And no disrespect to Johnny Edwards, who good singer. I like this album. Is it classic Foreigner? I don't know, but this just Didn't certify at all. It was their first album not to do so. One and done album for Johnny. Of course, we know Lou would come back, a couple of years later, but I think it's a pretty rocking album. Doesn't have any of those memorable can't miss singles, which this band was kind of all about. I mean, you expected every Foreigner album would have 2-3 tracks at least that you would hear all over the radio that would be can't miss songs. They tried with this. Low Down and Dirty is the only one that I remember ever hearing, and I heard it very briefly. They pushed that on more like FM rock radio, but that didn't cross over into the whole like MTV thing and everything else. And it just goes to show you, no iconic frontman, no sales. And like I said, they went back to the original configuration for a little bit before Lou started developing health problems and what have you. But this just, in fact, I wonder if you were to talk to like 10 casual, Foreigner fans out in the street. So what do you think of the Unusual Heat album? They'll probably tell you they never heard it. Right. Yeah. And could not, name any song. And if you named any of the songs for them, they'd be like, I don't think I ever heard it. So, which is a shame. Not a bad album. I don't mind it at all.
Yeah, terrible album cover too, and they should have kept the logo, right? I mean, the logo would have given them a little bit of identification with the old band, but
it's very cheesy 90s looking to me. It's very cheap looking. Like, I mean, the whole thing is just like, but yeah.
Yeah, and it just proves the importance of frontmen, in these bands. Guitarists always think, oh man, no, it's me, it's the songwriting and all that. I wrote all the songs anyways, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, I mean, 65% of that band at least is Lou Gramm. Yeah. Everybody else is expendable, including Mick, right? But the one guy you need there is that voice. Yeah. You need that voice there. But like I've always said, do it over and over again and have that lead singer writing 3 or 4 or 5 albums. He eventually ingratiates himself into the team, but it takes a long time.
It does, right? Multiple albums. And I was reading an interview with Mick just a couple hours ago here, and he was talking about, he really fought when Lou left the band. He really fought not to bring in some guy with a big name and a big presence. He wanted someone who was unknown, who could make an impact, and then basically never even gave him a chance because he was gone before you knew it. So would they have been better suited bringing in another big name? I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. But we know, how many bands in the history of rock have lost a iconic frontman and then brought in someone with a big name and still did really well. I mean, Van Halen, Black Sabbath, we could probably go on and on. It doesn't always work, but might that have worked in this instance? Who knows? We know this didn't work, right? So,
and Johnny was on Montrose Mean too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, my next choice is this band here. So this is the album before the bomb. Blue Oyster Cult, Fire of Unknown Origin. Big album associated with a heavy metal soundtrack. A lot of hits on it. Burning for You. Joan Crawford, somewhat got played on radio, etc. And this is the one that's a bomb. So Revolution by Night came out in '83, produced by Bruce Fairburn, who is no longer with us. He died in 1999. Big Vancouver producer, right? But the whole thing is, talking about this in the context of this bomb idea. You wonder if if something like when you put out the double live album and it's the second one that kind of like, it doesn't go over that. Well, it's a third one in this case, because they had the single one, which was well celebrated. On Your Feet or On Your Knees was well celebrated. But you put out this one and all of a sudden it's not that well celebrated. You learn through the magazines that there's some discord in the band, and Albert Bouchard is gone and he's replaced by Rick Downey. So your drummer here is Rick Downey. And, you get a drum sound on it where there's a lot of syndrums, electronic drums on it that actually really stand out to you. But, you wonder if it's more like, I think, Pete, you mentioned this before about letting too much time pass or whatever and putting this out in between. I mean, it's only 2 years when you get up to this one, but nothing really stuck off this. I remember the advanced single was Take Me Away, which turned out to be the heaviest song in the entire album. And, loved it at the time. It was cool. It's a UFO song. but then it's got some good stuff in terms of Shooting Shark was a kind of a cool, interesting song. Light Years of Love, a ballad, not a terrible one. Veins was kind of interesting. Shadow of California is a little bit of one of their Imaginos saga songs. It's a little bit heavy, but Feel the Thunder and Let Go, you're starting to move into the Club Ninja kind of poppy hard rock world. Really cool back cover on it by Greg Scott, who we just lost a little while ago. He just died. The great Blue Oyster Cult artist. Fire of Unknown Origin, it's certified officially as gold, but in the Blue Oyster Cult world, we often talk about how if it was to be recertified, it'd probably be platinum at this point. I think for many, many, many years, it's been 800,000. And then this didn't certify at all. No hits on it. It really does, when you actually go back and visit it, it really does feel like a bridge album to Club Ninja. It's got a lot of those same sort of elements. The production's not great on it. It's definitely got quite an 80s production that Bruce Fairbairn applies to it, and mostly you hear that in those very distracting electronic drums. So there you go. Revolution by Night.
I also think too, the Blue Oyster Cult really struggled in the 80s with the whole image thing, because how important was image to so many, hard rock and metal bands at that time? If you didn't have that look and something to kind of grab people visually, you kind of got forgotten a little bit. And they were kind of like, they became like this kind of faceless band, which, unfortunate, because the music always gave what you really needed from the band anyway, but that always wasn't the number one most important thing during the 80s.
It's funny, come to think of it, I never thought about this but when you say faceless band, there were no album cover or no band pictures on Fire or Revolution by Night or Club Ninja or Imaginos for that matter.
Right.
Yeah,
I quite like that album. Is it one of their best? No, but I like it. It's a shame when you have these pretty solid records that deserved better, but for all the reasons that we're bringing up, just that didn't get there. So, and here's one. This is now, so we're going to 1992 here. Martin and I have both talked about this album before. I felt it fits into this topic quite well, and this is a perfect example of an album that I'll come right out and say it borders on genius, but because it didn't have certain elements from the album before it that made the band pretty big, it just kind of sank and people were really disinterested. And I'm talking about Three Sides to Every Story by Extreme. So, we've seen this happen before. You have this young band who releases an album that really catches on with the general public. But why does it catch on with the general public? Because of a single or two that really were not indicative of what the rest of their music was all about. So Wholehearted and More Than Words obviously were the two big hits from this album, completely different than anything else on Porno Graffiti. And you had all of a sudden the non-hard rock and metal fans latching onto this band, maybe buying Porno Graffiti, maybe just for the two songs, maybe they like some of it, maybe they didn't. The singles, sold lots of copies, played all over the radio, MTV. All of a sudden, Extreme is this big deal. Everybody loves them. All the women like them. It's like, wow, great. They're good looking guys, yada, yada, yada. And then they come out with this not long afterwards and whoosh, went right over the head of all those people that latched onto this band for all the wrong reasons. And Martin and I have both talked about it. We've done Extreme Ranking here. We did it on Guitar Hack Show. This is an incredible album. Basically, it's a concept album. It's divided into three parts: Yours, Mine, and The Truth. All sorts of different styles and feels on here. You got some epic, hard rock. You got some funk metal. You've got some proggy stuff, right? You got some pop on here, but nothing like More Than Words. And most people, again, it just goes to show you that, what is the percentage of the music public, the general public, that only buys albums based on a hit single they heard on the radio. Radio stations weren't touching this with a 10-foot pole. It did go gold, okay, just made gold compared to double platinum of Porno Graffiti, but this band was never the same again. And it's really it's really sad that this was such a massive commercial disappointment, considering how much of an artistic achievement it is. Just so many great songs on here. Warheads, rest in peace. It's divided by those sections that I mentioned before, and each section of music and tracks has a different feel, has different styles in it. And just, Our Father, glorious vocals, great guitar work from Nuno. Just the arrangements are spectacular. I can't say enough good things about this album, and yet it's just become forgotten in like the history of rock and roll, or hard rock and metal specifically, other than the people who really are true extreme fans, right? So.
Yeah, they were a late arrival to the whole hair metal thing anyways, but the really wild thing about that record is they doubled down on getting even more clean and pristine and clinical and poppy and absolutely perfect with the vocals and precise with everything Nuno was doing. That very rhythmic, just bang 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 sound on that. So by that point, many hair metal bands were trying to adjust to the new grunge reality and be dirtier and grindier, but Extreme went the other way, and not a great album cover either, with the greens.
The album cover is terrible. Yeah. But I mean, you would think that the music would latch on to people other than just the tried and true hardcore Extreme fans, and it just didn't work out that way. And again, it's like there's no real hit singles on there. I don't even remember were they pushing any of these songs on MTV, like in videos. I think they had maybe one video for this. I don't even remember, so long ago. But that's how important those mediums were back then, right? So and it's just a shame, because artistically it's a crowning achievement, but commercially it just did not do a thing.
Yeah, that's an interesting segue to this one, because it's kind of the exact same situation with different career decisions. But so my next one is Motley Crue, with the Motley Crue album, the self-titled. There's two different, like the King's X, they came in different colors with the CMYK thing going on there. So what happens is Motley Crue, the first one, I can't even picture this as a platinum album, but the first one's platinum. Shout at the Devil is 4 times platinum. Theater, 4 times platinum. Girls, 4 times platinum. Dr. Feelgood, 6 times platinum. That's the Go to Vancouver and Try Harder album. Then they have the Trouble, and they lose their lead singer. And they get John Corabi in for this. But it takes a while to come out. We're all the way up into 1994 now. So it's just this nether zone for hard rock. They do the exact opposite of Extreme. They come up with a super noisy, slow, grinding, gritty album that is a lot of people's favorite Motley Crue album. A lot of people like this album, and I quite like it as well. And I like John Corabi. Tommy Lee does some really interesting, groovy, different things, proves why he's considered one of those drummers that has his own personal stamp. He's kind of got a neat visual thing, and he's got a neat sort of hi-hat thing that he does. And just a good drummer, an interesting drummer. But it proves the thing we just talked about with Foreigner, where you lose that lead singer, Vince has the visual, and he has that kind of high twang thing to him, and he's a big personality, and they've got all this drama in the band. So here they're trying to do it without losing their most important member of the band. Frankly, I mean, it just is, right? I mean, Nicky's important. He's bass player, utilitarian, writing. He's the kind of like the business head of the band. And Mick, he's got his progressing health problems, but he's still in there writing and doing the interesting Mick writing. And we've talked about Tommy, but so this album essentially just basically it goes gold. And Generation Swine is also a very interesting album. Vince is actually back for this one, but it's a little bit of a carryover from the Motley Crue album. These are by far their two most experimental albums. And then this one doesn't do well at all. New Tattoo, and then Saints of Los Angeles doesn't do well. I mean, neither of them certify, and both of them have Vince back, and both they're kind of back to the original sound. But yeah, for this one time, they get John Corabi in, who's a big old classic rock fan. So there's a lot of Led Zeppelin on here and Beatles influence. But other than that, it's a lot of grunge influence. It's a heavy, slow, grinding, noisy, distorted sort of record. So they changed so much from Dr. Feelgood to this album, and they changed the singer at the same time, and it basically doesn't do very, very much business. And I remember at the time, this is when Tim and I started doing Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles, and this was so promoted. Like, they really poured a lot of promotion in this, and apparently they re-signed a contract with Elektra, re-signed for $25 million, whatever that means, but it's the same label they'd always been on. So this is why, I guess, also I really almost can't even think of a bigger push put on something like this, where you're behind the 8 ball with a new singer. But I remember them, just promoting the hell out of that album with singles and CD singles and advanced singles and all that stuff. A lot of press, and then 6 times platinum to gold. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, most folks know I have like no use for Motley Crue, but I will say that is one of the few albums in their catalog that I can actually listen to. So yeah, I thought Corabi was a good fit there. He's a good singer, but again, I guess the general public was like, nah, no Vince. Yeah, not interested. It's a shame.
He's a dark-haired singer too, rather than the blonde singer, so he doesn't look like Vince. He's a great singer, good-looking guy, smart guy, great songwriter. Knows a lot about music, and he went on to do other really cool things as well. So
yeah. All right, so my next choice, and I don't have a copy to show because it's one of those albums that you probably don't even need to own. But again, it kind of, we're talking about similar things here, the lead singer thing. So the album is Fleetwood Mac Time from 1995. So it's the 16th album by this band, who have had lots of lineup changes over the years, right? But, generally speaking, Fleetwood Mac has that like main focus. Originally it was, Peter Green. Then you have, the Bob Welch years, which unfortunately were not big selling years, but very fruitful from an artistic standpoint. And then you bring in these 2 unknowns and Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham, and then the band shoots through the moon. That was the formula that they were kind of lacking. So here in the early 90s, you've got Stevie and Lindsey both leaving the band, leaving them for dead right at this point. Christine McVie is not touring anymore with the band at the time, but she's still taking part in recording and writing. And they bring in what, on paper, I remember at the time I was thinking, oh, this might work. Dave Mason, guitarist and vocalist, legendary solo artist, also played with Traffic for many years. And, Becca Bramlett, who was fairly big on the kind of the country and the country rock scene. And, I remember thinking, well, this might be kind of interesting. And I remember going out and buying the CD at the time. I never kept it. That kind of shows you how bad it was. And the 2 of them are joining up with Christine on the album. And of course, John McVie and Mick Fleetwood, and Billy Burnett on guitars, who still, was in the band for a few years. The album doesn't chart. They did a lot of press for it, because I remember seeing all over the place, new lineup of Fleetwood Mac, Dave Mason. I mean, they promoted this to no end. Doesn't chart, doesn't certify, no hit singles. The band goes out on tour without Christine, does terrible business, and then everybody basically leaves, and they're left in disarray once again. Although they somehow convinced Stevie and Lindsey to come back again, and then from there they took off and did what they normally do. So it's a perfect instance of one of those bands that you've got these 2 key members, and without those 2 members, you got to have one or the other, because we've seen this band do pretty good business still when Lindsey's not around, or when Stevie's not around but Lindsey's in there. But if you take both of them out of the equation at this point in time, it just doesn't work, and people don't care. And I remember the critical mashing of this album was like, to read like all these reviews at the time was pretty funny, although kind of sad. And like I said, I bought the CD at the time, and I remember thinking, man, there's not a memorable song on here. There's some, and I revisited it recently when I did my Fleetwood Mac album ranking, and I'm like, it's just as dull and unmemorable as I remember it back, almost 30 years ago. And it's a shame, because you had some talented people in the band, but sometimes it's all about chemistry, and there really wasn't any. And that's kind of how the album comes across. There's no chemistry, there's no synergy. It's almost like, we put all these people together that shouldn't be together. We're going to try and make it work, and it doesn't, and it completely bombed.
Yeah, it's funny. You say chemistry, and also, I guess, personalities. That band is about personalities, because you're making a very sort of spare, obscure, tiny music. all the time, right? So
And
it's not like
the tension worked. Yeah.
you're not Dream Theater. You don't have all these other amazing, interesting things going on. You're just literally Lindsay with his little chicken scratch guitar and Mick just going doo dee doo dee doo. You know, that's the drumming from Fleetwood Mac, right? And then you've got these vocalists, and even the lyrics are generally kind of like really pared down. You know, they're apparently deep, you know, about personal relationships and all that, and they are because there are so few of them, right?
Yeah.
They aren't deep, elaborate stories. They aren't concept albums. So if you're missing those personalities in a band that is all about those people and their lives and how they interact together, you don't really have a band. So
Yeah, it's just very disjointed. It's kind of like this, and there's this big like country rock vibe going on throughout the whole album, which I guess they did little bits of throughout their career, but it's just not interesting. And it just sounds like a bunch of people who, you know, don't really know each other, and there's no synergy there whatsoever. I mean, you know, chemistry always worked in Fleetwood Mac because of the tension between, I mean, let's face it, a lot of really crazy shit went on behind the scenes with this band, right? You know, the relationships and breaking up, and this one's cheating with this one, and this one's getting divorced. Now it's crazy, but it made for some really entertaining music and songwriting over the years. But that was completely lacking on this album. It's just cold and just bland and forgettable. That's the word, forgettable. It's a amazingly forgettable album.
Yeah. All right. That actually is an interesting segue to my last one in terms of the personalities, because my last one is Kiss with Psycho Circus.
Yeah.
So that's the album that came out in '98, and this isn't even a story of bombing from a great height of record sales down to a lower record sales, because essentially Revenge, this record, which is amazing, it's one of the best latter-day Kiss records. This is their kind of go to Vancouver and try harder album, although I don't know if they went to Vancouver with this. I can't remember. And then I like Carnival of Souls because I think this is a really cool, thoughtful, grungy album. I bought into it at the time. A lot of people do, a lot of people don't. But the reunion album, the problem with this is it was no reunion, essentially. Peter drums on like one song. Ace is sparing throughout. They got a lot of session guys in it. And the way this relates to Fleetwood Mac is that they're trying to recapture the simplicity of old Kiss on this. And when you've already given everybody, the kind of dressed up metal of the 80s, and then Revenge being just so well written throughout and so much variety and beautifully recorded by Bob Ezrin. It's a really powerful recording. And then Carnival of Souls gives you something else again to just try to write simple, stupid Kiss songs. They better be good songs, and they're really not on this. I thought the opening track, Psycho Circus, is okay. Within, I hate Within. That's what I call one of Gene's bass fart songs, where it's like you hear the bass and you can picture Gene doing this, on it. It's just like riding on this dumb bass line. It's like that turned me off the album right away. I Pledge Allegiance to the State of Rock and Roll is one of the better songs on it. Paul sings. I'm happy when Paul. Actually, I love all the singers in Kiss, but Paul really sells that song. Into the Void is pretty good. This is your standard Ace. Hey, we got our heavy Ace song. The Wild Man is back, right? So that's pretty good. We Are One is pretty terrible. It's really terrible. That's like a pop ballad, and Gene sings it, and we are one and all this. Like, no, you're not really one with everybody. We know that's not the case, right? You aren't one with the rest of the guys in the band, and you're not really one of these bands that just hangs out with their fans unless kind of they're paying you to do so, right? Kind of thing. But and Raise Your Glasses is just like a bad, hey, raise your glasses, right? I Finally Found My Way, crappy, awful ballad. This is the Pete singing along to a ballad orchestra, tick off all those boxes. There's only 10 songs on it, so you don't have time to screw up, right? And they're screwing up all over this thing. Dreamin's one of those psychedelic Beatles songs that many bands did. I that always turns me off. It's a ballad kind of thing. Journey of a Thousand Years, orchestrated, decent kind of poppy ballad, cool drums in it. Don't like the chorus at all. But yeah, for an album that short and having all this drama behind it, and eventually, Kiss fans are great detectives. They'll find out all the dirt going on underneath. There was a lot of dirt here.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hype around it. Those guys back together and the makeup and the whole thing, but the record just didn't stand up, especially after having this kind of cool bunch of records, at least a couple. I thought, I'm not a fan of those last two records of Kiss in the 80s, but I love every single one of them before that. I love Asylum and Animalize and Creatures and Lick It Up. But I loved Revenge. I mean, Revenge is probably my favorite Kiss album, probably between Lick It Up all the way to the end, Monster and Sonic Boom. I mean, Revenge, I think, is just a really well put together Kiss album. And that's how you write those simple songs properly. You get good production, just solid songwriting, and a little, tongue in cheek, and none of this sort of pandering to the crowd thing, and trying to write like old stuff. I've said it before. A punk band can't come back and be punky. Stooges can't come back and be the old gritty Stooges. Fleetwood Mac can't do it without, the proper members in the band. And Kiss just can't go back to this simple thing, especially if you're only going to give us 10 songs. They all got to be great. So, and they weren't.
Yeah, I think that album broke the hearts of a lot of Kiss fans. I remember how excited we all were to have those guys back together again, and then you get the album, you're like, this does not sound like a Kiss together on all fronts, all four of them, right? I mean, it just didn't sound like it, and as we found out, it really wasn't. And the song they're just not that good. It's very average and lackluster, unfortunately, and that should have been a great return to form, a great return of the original lineup, and it just wasn't. It wasn't. I talked to so many people who are like, big Kiss fans, and nobody talks very highly about that album.
Yeah.
Everybody. Yeah,
also produced by Bruce Fairbairn, my earlier example, Blue Oyster Cult, who's, like I say, no longer with us. And the reason I thought of that is when you said the songs aren't very good, they're also dragged down by this really kind of like drippy, wet, heavy drum sound at the bottom. Just like there's a drag on all the songs, that none of them are buoyant and groove, because they're just like, sounds like people hitting big concrete blocks.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's a good choice. All right, my final pick of the day, released in 1998. Well, we got a lot of 90s albums in this show here today. Another example of the whole lead singer thing, but I think there's more to this story than that. So Van Halen 3, 1998. So of course the band ends their long relationship with Sammy Hagar, and let's be frank, I don't know if we can find another band in the history of rock and roll, or certainly hard rock, who have a crazy run of multi-platinum sellers like Van Halen. I mean, from that very first album right up to Balance, I mean, we're talking 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 12, whatever, million sellers, every single one of them. Whether you favor the Roth era over the Hagar era, doesn't really matter. People bought these albums in droves. So they part ways with Sammy. They bring in Gary Cherone from Extreme. I remember when I first heard this news, I was pretty stoked, because we all know Gary is a tremendous singer. He's a tremendous front man. He's a good songwriter. I mean, this sounds like kind of no-brainer, right? Unfortunately, I think he joined a band that was kind of pretty tired at the time. Obviously, there were issues going on with Michael Anthony, and were the Van Halen brothers that into it? Were they dealing with their own stuff behind the scenes? Probably. But this should have been a can't miss scenario. But the album is really long for Van Halen, right? It's lacking, Van Halen, especially in the Hagar era, hit singles galore. I mean, every album. I mean, I can think of, at least 2 or 3 of them that had 3, 4, 5 singles that were played on radio and MTV constantly. Really none of that here. Cherone also to my ears, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this, doesn't really, he's missing something that we heard on the Extreme albums. I get the impression it's almost like the band wanted him to sound a little like Sammy, to have that kind of edge to his vocals, and that's how it was produced. And he's missing that personality that I think we love so much from those Extreme albums. And Michael Anthony's hardly on the album. He barely plays any bass. I don't think he did much, if any, backing vocals. I don't find Eddie's guitar work all that inspiring on this album. Sure, it's still Edward Van Halen, but you know, where's all the great riffs and all the great solos? Don't hear a lot of them. I don't like my post-production on it. I think it's kind of flat. The album cover is terrible, and it didn't sell. It didn't sell. For me, it's, and I have everything Van Halen ever put out. I don't even own that album. Don't even own it, because I really don't like it. And, you know, this album would, you know, not do well commercially, and the band would kind of disappear for a long time afterwards. We wouldn't see another album from them for many, many, many years. So, yeah, big bomb, Van Halen 3.
Yeah. Yeah, Marco and I actually did a Contrarians episode of our worst album show on Van Halen 3, and we actually did a Contrarians on like worst album on the Kiss album as well. But yeah, this Van Halen, an interesting thing about Sammy that Gary, that you alluded to there, the personality missing thing. It's almost like on some of it, especially you know, as the album sort of kicks in and Dirty Water Dog and all this, Fire in the Hole, it sounds like he's trying to you know, not only sing like Sammy and add some of that vocal grit or vocal fry, as they call it, in there, you know, forcing him in that direction that he doesn't really need to be in or want to be in, because he's his own man, and why make him sound like someone else? But it's almost like they're trying to get the Sammy Hagar personality into him too, right? The big party rocker guy, the big drinker, you know, and out with the gals and all that stuff. So it's almost like they're trying to turn, or Gary with his exhortations and yelps and the lyrics and stuff all over here. It's almost like they're trying to turn, or Gary's trying to become more of a hair metal guy that even was an Extreme, like all those things you don't like about hair metal guys. He's more of that on here. It's a little bit of that, whatever that first song is on Van Halen 5150, not Get Up, but the one that has practically no lyrics at all, whereas hey, ha, oh, ah, you know, just stupid, right?
Yeah, it's Get Up. It's Get Up, actually. Yeah.
Well, Get Up, I think, is the fast one, but there's one just before it. Get Up. Yeah, Get Up is the double bass one, which is stupid too. It does exactly the same thing. Like, honestly, I mean, I understand when you read some of those grumblings about Sammy not putting his heart into the lyrics too much. Like, that was one of the things that really bothered them, right? But it's almost like Gary's dumbing himself down, essentially, from three sides to every story, and on pornography. And, you know, you think about it, Gary's almost like trying to become more of a caveman on this. Yeah. To match I don't know what he's trying to match, to match Sammy's big, bold personality. And you saw it in the videos and everything as well. And yeah, you're right. Just the songs aren't there. The album cover isn't there. The title isn't there.
Yeah, it's like, and Gary to me just feels like a hired gun. I think, you know, we were so used to him and Nuno being this great songwriting partnership, the brothers. They're almost like, kind of like, you know, Perry and Tyler from Aerosmith. That's kind of the impression that most of us got about Extreme. And then he comes into Van Halen, he's just that guy who's our singer now, right? And you get the impression that, you know, does Eddie really want like a songwriting partner like that? I think Eddie just wants a singer at this point. I mean, did anybody really know what Eddie wanted at that point in time? Because he just kind of seemed disinterested in everything. And, you know, maybe all the years of touring and the hard partying, it just had kind of caught up with him a little bit at that point. And he's, you know, by 1998, Eddie was, you know, how old? In his 50s, right? So, or late 40s anyway. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of a mess of an album, and it's just totally unmemorable. Totally unmemorable. So there you have it, everybody. Some additional album bombs in the history of rock. 10 more for you guys to chew on. If you think we've missed any of them, please put them in the comments below. This was a fun 2-episode series to do. Of course, we are moving on though, because next week, you know, speaking of hired guns, we are going to start a little program, another 2-episode program starting next week, where we're going to be talking about some of those hired guns, you know, those guys or gals who kind of would show up everywhere and never stick around anywhere long enough. They could be drummers, a lot of drummers, guitar players, singers, bass players. You know, there's a lot of usual suspects. So we're going to be talking about them for 2 successive episodes. So stay tuned for that starting next week. Martin, what's going on over with the Contrarians and with the website and new books?
Yeah. Contrarians, we actually just put up a Gillan episode where I talk about my favorite Gillan album is Double Trouble. And what else did Marco and I? Yeah, we filmed the Motorhead one, so that'll be going up shortly. My banger overkill review of the Maiden just went up. In the book world, just one tiny thing happened, but it did cause some some orders. Definitely, I'm kind of surprised, but I put my old Van Halen book, Unchained, a Van Halen user manual, and my Merciful Fate book, Black Funeral, Into the Coven with Merciful Fate. Put both of those back in print after being out of print for a long time. So I just received those 2 days ago, and they're flying out the door. Only 100 copies of each. So martinpopoff.com for those 2.
Cool. It's funny, Martin mentioned the Iron Maiden review. So he and I both did separate Iron Maiden reviews this week, and we were talking off air about how much attention those are getting and all the different comments from people, you know, from all over the world. And Iron Maiden fans are really an interesting bunch. Bunch.
Yeah, I've read 1,000 comments now, you know, and actually, as I was saying to Pete, after reading 1,000 comments, you really start to understand, you know, they clump into certain areas, and you really start to even get more of a contour of the personality of this record. But you're right. And they could be all over the place. Some people hate the album. Some people say it's the greatest thing they ever done. It's just baffling, right?
Yeah. So, and we'll continue to see more, because I'm sure we got lots of legs left on both of our reviews of this album, because it's only a week old today. So people are hot and heavy wanting to talk about Iron Maiden. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it somewhere in between? I don't know, whatever. So it's Maiden, right? So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned for more with Martin and myself next Friday morning. Coming up on Sunday, we've got album homework assignment. We've got Sydney Taylor from the Hudson Valley Squares going head to head with Bryce from Bryce Talks Metal. That is happening on Sunday. And then a week from Sunday, we've got Chris Allo and Louis Nasser facing off. That should be a lot of fun as well. And we hope to see Martin doing an album homework assignment sometime in the near future as well. So stay tuned for all this stuff. And of course, the return of the Hudson Valley Squares on Monday. So what we didn't get to last Monday, in fact, Martin's going to be there as well. We're going to do a comparison discussion on Deep Purple's Come Taste the Band and Slaves and Masters, those 2 albums with those one lineups that only lasted 1 album for each. We're going to kind of dissect and look at those, what we like about them, what we don't like about them, and see which one gets the nod amongst the panel. So that's coming up on Monday. So thanks for watching, everybody. For Martin Popoff, I have Pete Pardo. Have a good weekend. Take care.